All right, Dr. Ron England here, and I'm going to take you through step 2 of the Assessment Assistant application. I've got Visual Studio opened up. I've made multiple versions of the Assessment Assistant, but I've also deleted them all. So I can take you through a nice clean build of this. So we're going to create a new project that will be the Assessment Assistant, and what will happen is you're going to get a number of templates that you can work with. The standard template for doing a .NET Core web app is the one that says ASP.NET Core web app. The other templates that you might find yourself using is the one to create an .NET Core empty. But when you do that, there's no content, so you're going to have to build everything. And also the MVC is a relatively useful one because it actually builds some of the models, the views in those directories. We're going to actually build that as we go along, however. The other one that I use on a regular basis is the ASP.NET Web Framework, the .NET Framework, because it's got the capability of building .NET Web Forms. And I've got a lot of web forms videos that are out there. So, actually doing development with web forms with the code behind and all that piece. But we're kind of focusing on the MVC. And in this case, we'll be using Entity Framework, Code First methodology. So we're going to build everything from this. So we're going to pick this and click Next. And we'll go ahead and name this. The project will be Assessment Assistant. And location and the solution name will be the same. We'll move very quickly through this. I'm going to use individual accounts for authentication, so I can actually have some of that built. And you may actually have versions of .NET after this. If you watch this in the future, you may see .NET 7 or whatever. But .NET 6, I mean, I've been working with the .NET framework all the way from the very beginning, and there've been very good upward compatibility, usually some changes that have to be done. So I've been pretty happy with that. So once that's done, we're going to go ahead and build the create. So it's going to create the project. And once the project is created, it will give you your Solution Explorer. And it'll give you a little bit of up here in the overview some information about how to actually work with the IDE. You probably have some familiar with the IDE. This is Visual Studio. The building the app's got some. Now, I have gone through a few of the things with the tutorials here, and there have been some errors in these tutorials, which I'm going to fix as we go along. But the first thing that you normally would do when you develop an app, when you get the application, the base of the application built, is go ahead and click on the build. So this is a debug build, but it should build and open the web browser. If everything is configured correctly, what should happen is you should be able to get the diagnostic tools over here to the right, and you should see your default browser pop up with your localhost, a port number, and the welcome building web apps with ASP.NET Core, which, by the way, if you click on it, gives you a lot of information about some documentation here. So I would recommend, if you're not familiar with doing these, go ahead and start working through the getting started here. The tutorial is not necessarily bad. The problem is if you're running through the tutorial, where you're at in the actual development process, sitting here working with the inside of Visual Studio, really none of this applies. So, but I mean, some of it may apply, but it doesn't take you through. We're not going straight to the .NET CLI and issuing commands. That's not something that we're going to do. So, but you do have the ability, like we just showed, to work with to start the application up and running. You can stop it anytime with that little red dot that I just clicked there. And you should take a really quick look at the right-hand side where you've got the Solution Explorer. These pages are built in. If I go back and restart this, you do have, these are the pages that you're seeing. Then you do have the data here. Now note that you actually have a context. Application DB context is going to be important to you. The application DB context is where stuff goes. So this is where you're going to actually declare the different models that are going to be here. Now, this is going to be, as we go through here, I'm also going to show you that much of that is automated. Also, since we're going to be doing code first, we're going to be building the database from the code. So migrations will actually be important. We're going to go into the tools. We're going to go all the way down here to the NuGet Package Manager, and we're going to bring up the package console and do some builds of the database. And we're also going to build migrations. But important things first is you're going to be building some models. And what I mean by models is when we, in part one, went through and said, hey, here's how the data, here's the pieces of data, and here's how they're structured, and here's the information that we have to keep track of. Those are going to be models. And we're going to be building models as we go along. I'm going to take you through the steps of building these models and then going ahead and building how they're, and we're actually going to scaffold pages, full pages, because one of the beauties of the this framework is that it has the ability to build the default pages to go with specific models that you've built. Now, if you're not sure what I'm saying when I say models, think of this as a database table and how you're going to be building, or maybe even a database view, but how you're going to be building code that writes, that goes to and from the database from the web application, sends data back and forth. So just think of it that way. And each model might be the concept of, the closest concept you can probably think of is a table, but you know, people are going to go, oh, well, that's not actually 100% correct, because it isn't absolutely 100% correct. But it's also kind of the concept of a view. So that's where we are. What is important here that you're going to look at here? Well, the program CS file is going to be important. This is the file that kind of controls the whole thing. And then so think of program.cs as, okay, it starts by running program CS, and in here there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on. One is it says, oh, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the DB context. And over here we're going to start the default identity, which, by the way, we're going to change. We're going to make that, I don't use identity user, I create application user, which is going to be inherit from identity user, because I want to be able to extend the identity user to add fields to it. And then it builds, and here it's actually, oh, if it's development, we've got this thing that it's going to do. So it has a great ability to control the starting of the entire thing. And then at the very bottom it goes app run. Okay, so that does, it is important, it does get used, and you're going to see it change. App settings is important because it actually sets, now notice there's not a lot of settings here, but you do have a connection to a database, and there's really not a lot here as far as logging. So, but that's going to get bigger. So the app settings control the settings of the application itself. Then up here, the application DB context, which we're going to use. Again, that's another important file that will get used. You're going to actually be making changes to that file. And I'm not really going to go into areas just yet, but when we go into here and start working with the identity, which is going to be the login identity, we'll be making some changes there too. If you've watched some of my previous case studies, you might have seen any of this, but I'm going to go through this one very methodically. So as you've seen, you've got some of this already done and built. So you've got a good starting point. Now we're going to build on top of that starting point next, in the next video.